Welcome to the Bucket Plan on Demand, a podcast for financial advisors based on the best-selling book and process that simplifies financial planning. Hear from skilled industry professionals and special guests each episode that will help perfect your approach with clients and your results.
Hello, everyone. I'm Dave Alison, president and founding partner at C2P. Recently, I had a conversation with Stan Milovancev, co-CEO of Prosperity Capital Advisors, focused on mergers and acquisitions and the critical role advisors play when clients face major business transitions. This conversation was so rich that we split it into two parts. You're currently listening to part 2 of that discussion. If you haven't already heard or watched part 1, you'll find the link in the description of today's episode. In this part, Stan and I shift the focus squarely to advisors serving clients who are actively navigating a merger, acquisition, or a business exit. We talk about how advisors can position themselves as true strategic partners, not just technical experts, by acting as the economic quarterback, helping clients think through tax strategy, cash flow modeling, estate planning, deal structure, and most importantly, life after the transaction. We hope you enjoy part 2 of this important and practical conversation.
That's a great point. So speaking of needing help, let's shift to talking about our clients who are going through some sort of potential transaction, M&A, business exit. Talk about how an advisor can position themselves as really a strategic partner during the client's merger, sale, acquisition, whichever side of the transaction that the client is sitting on.
Yeah, I'll do that. And when we're talking about this kind of stuff, I'm going to drag you right back in because I know, first of all, you're going through this yourself. You're also going through it with some clients, and you are a true industry expert in the technical parts of these things. So I'm going to turn it around too. I'll take the easy strategic side, and I'll let you help me out on some of the other. But on the strategic side, I do think we have to frame ourselves in our mind, even in our own mind, as being the economic quarterback. This is not just a transaction for them. There is a whole slew of economic related issues. So how do we help them think about the tax side of this, the investment side of this, the estate planning, the business advisory strategies, all of the related issues? You and I knew for a fact that if we can coach people more than a year in advance, they might want to change the structure of their organization, their tax structure, so that it's more beneficial to them. But it's difficult to do that in a short sale, like in a 6-month window. You might need to do that a year in advance. So the idea of us being able to. So now this can be a little bit tougher, but I would say advisors of the future, if you want to work with entrepreneurs, you have to get into this space. You have to understand this. And I would say most clients, Dave, they want to know that we've seen this movie before. They'd like us to be the Hallmark movie of the world. Like, isn't all Hallmark movies the same thing? Somebody falls in love, they have a little bit of an issue, they all get back together and everybody's happily ever after and there's beautiful lights everywhere. So Hallmark movies have a theme. So does M&A. So our clients, it's probably a once in a lifetime experience for them. But they would like to know that we have seen this movie before. And here's how to help them think it through. Here's the experts that they need. Here's how we need to position this. We need to do some cash planning. We need to do some modeling. Are they going to roll equity in? Are they not going to roll? It's going to be all cash play. Those are the kind of things when I say we need to be their economic advisor and position for this discussion for them. Yeah. Does that make sense to you kind of from a strategic level?
100%. And honestly, that is, I would argue, a higher value activity with the client than some of the tax and the financial stuff, because you truly are being, a shoulder for them to lean on, hug, cry, whatever. There's a lot of emotions that go into, particularly if they're the seller, not as much the buyer, but if they're the seller, there's an awful lot of emotions that go into that. Yes, in some cases, it's kind of their entire identity that is potentially transforming overnight. And so you're dead on with the strategic side.
So I think one of our jobs is, okay, what's your role exactly going to be? What's the role of your team? What reporting? Let's go our space. What reporting system are we using? What's the cadence? Are we confirming pricing structures? Exactly how does this thing look? Am I trading equity? Meaning I'm going to get, so what does that look like? What's my position? How does life look like? What's my benefits package going to look like? All the details that people tend to forget about it's rarely are people disappointed with the cash they got, because they kind of know that it's everything else that got sidelined.
Yeah. And to your point, I have 2 clients right now that are in transaction of potentially selling. And I've done this and kind of seen this story play out time and time again. And one of the things that you mentioned, and I stress this with every business owner client I have, it's better to start earlier. I have some business owners that don't have any intention of selling for a long time, but the strategic and the tactical planning should happen earlier. Because I also can't tell you how many times the planning hadn't been done. And then I get a call at 4:00 on a Friday saying, "Hey, Dave, I just got a term letter to sell my business for $60 million. What now?" And it's like, there's not as many options. Like, hey, that's a lot of money. That's great. But like, it could have been optimized in a more meaningful way. And so, I think when I'm talking to these business owner clients, the first thing that we're talking about is what's the purpose and the fulfillment. If they were to sell their company where they're used to working around the clock, day in and day out, it is a big part of their identity. And for the successful ones, it's providing them a really meaningful cash flow, income, lifestyle. Like, what does Act 2 look like? Because, some people, when they lose their identity, they start to lose their health, their mind deteriorates, like they just don't have the fulfillment and purpose. And so to everything you said, like, that's absolutely critical to start thinking about that early, to start thinking about what is your number? What's your wealth gap? The wealth gap is all of the liquid investable assets that you've built up, plus what do we need to actually transact your business for net after taxes to fill the rest of the gap so that you can live the lifestyle that you and your family want to live forever on into the future. And so starting to think about what that target number is, right? So that you could know that if I have 3 deals in front of me, I don't just have to take the highest offer if maybe it's not going to meet my other needs, like how my staff are going to be taken care of, how my clients are going to be taken care of, how my business name and reputation is going to live on. So really understanding and knowing their number is absolutely important. The tax and the tactical, like estate planning, yeah, they should have trust. If they're going to have potential estate tax issues, potentially irrevocable trust where we can take marketability discounts and get some of that money outside of their taxable estate, particularly if they have more than enough to suffice for their own lifestyle. Like, we're not going to get into those things today, but those are all really, really critical to think about and talk about with clients. But then when it actually starts becoming real for the client, when they're actively pursuing, let's say, an exit or a merger, I think what I've found more than anything is deal fatigue is a real thing. Deal fatigue is a real thing. It is mentally taxing on people,
Yes.
Even if it's an amazing deal. And even if they're super excited about it, they're not sleeping well at night. They're anxious. Maybe there's little clauses in their legal agreements that the attorneys are bickering about, and things always seem to drag on longer than they need to be. And your clients, our clients, they just need a very safe voice and zone to lean on. They need a friend to be able to kind of get them through the deal fatigue that they're going to experience. I have a client going through this right now, and he was like, 3 weeks ago, he said, "Dave, can we just meet for coffee? Can you block like 2 hours? And I just want to sit outside with you and have a couple cups of coffee. And like, I just want to hear your perspective on things that are going on." And in that meeting, I said, his name is David also. I said, "David, you're approaching, a pretty critical time in this evolution of like building a business, getting a business ready to sell, the actual exit, and then the post exit. And I said, and he goes, so Dave, like, what's your role in all of this? And I said, well, here's what I would highly recommend to you. I said, based on his size of his business, I said, there's really kind of three really, really key people that you need on your team. Number one is you need an M&A attorney. Like, I see so many people try to skimp on an M&A attorney. And I said, David, anyone who has enough resources to buy your business is going to have a team of M&A attorneys who are solely focused on their best interest, not your best interest. You need an M&A attorney that represents your company and has your company's best interest at heart and can negotiate and really vet out things on behalf of you and your company. I said the second person that you need in his situation was an investment banker because of the size and the scope. And like, they were going and looking for buyers, like they were putting the business up for sale. So the investment banking team had a specialization in his industry and could help maybe get deals done better. And then I said, the third is me. I said, I can facilitate one of two roles, but it's really hard for me to facilitate both roles. I said, you can hire me for your company and I can be a fiduciary to your company and help you navigate the ropes of this transaction and just be an ally and a consultant for your company. But you have other shareholders in that company. And so if I'm a fiduciary to your company, I can't necessarily also be a fiduciary to you individually because there might be some things that are in the best interest of the company, but maybe not the best interest of you as the CEO and your bottom line and your personal financial situation. I said, or I can be your personal fiduciary and not represent your company's interest. And I'm just here to guide you along the way. And he's the CEO and founder of the company. So guess what he chose? He said, Dave, you're in my corner. He was like, I need you as me and my family's fiduciary. And so again, like, I think it's about connecting the right resources to the client. And Stan, you mentioned this earlier, like, you don't need to be the expert on all these things, but if you can facilitate, like I introduced him to a couple M&A attorneys. He had his own investment banking team, but I said, hey, I'm willing to be a fly on the wall in the meeting if you want, and just give you my perspective, to be another, smart set of eyes and ears in the room. And it's incredible how much clients value and appreciate that because it shows you care. And the reality of it is we do care.
Dave, you're hitting on so many great themes there. I'll just take a few threads on them. Like, one is absolutely one of the roles is as an encourager. For instance, the idea of seeing the deal fatigue, the individuals that are in the center of it, let's say that David, they're dealing all day long with the M&A on this side, and they're dealing with the counterparties, they're going through stuff. Then they go home, and their spouses and those significant others that are involved are asking them a bunch of questions. And are you sure? So everywhere they're trying to like keep everybody informed and keep everything. That's tiring. And then what's going to happen is they're feeling good about the deal. All of a sudden, there's going to be one paragraph to change somewhere that in their mind is an unfair paragraph to change. They're going to go, can I trust these people? Should I pull the plug? We've got 4 months into this thing. And you have to be the guy that can go, listen, I've seen this movie before. That's a small change. Those things happen all the time. That does not make them dishonest brokers. That does not make them bad. That's normal. This is one to get past. But then another time, another paragraph change, you have to be able to go, no, this is material and major. This would be a walk away issue. They need another party to help them with those things. Because sometimes you just got to plod through, because nothing is perfect. You got to get it done. So that role is meaningful.
It is. And, the other side of it, again, going to this specific client is, he was at an inflection point in his life where, like, he wasn't willing to roll the dice and potentially, merge his equity into somebody else, take a second bite of the apple. Like, he was financially sound and kind of ready to kind of phase into retirement after this act is over, right? And so him being the CEO, him being the co-founder, him being the only existing shareholder that's an operator in the business. All the other, original founders, equity providers, they're all more silent, right? They sit on the board, but they're not, he's working, 60 hours a week as the CEO of this company also. And so at that coffee meeting, I said, David, like, we need to develop your personal term sheet. What are the non-negotiables for you? What are the things that you're open-minded to? Examples of that would be, how much equity would you roll into the new deal versus how much cash do you need up front? How many more years would you remain on as the CEO if they so choose to keep you on to help transition the business? What would your compensation package need to look like? Like, all of those little things, we sat there and just helped him brainstorm and map out so that he can take his personal term sheet to his other partners, his board, and say, this is what's important to me. Because the last thing that we wanted to do is have conflict at the board where 2 or 3 of the partners want to sell and cash out, even if it means my client David selling his soul to the wrong company and being forced to be miserable for the next 3 or 4 years. And so these are, again, the things that they really have nothing to do with investments and financial planning, but they have everything to do with financial planning and investments.
So Dave, because we're doing the bucket plan, I'm going to frame that underneath that with an expanded view just for a second. I think all of the discussions that happen here, there is the holistic wealth management, financial planning aspect of what's just changed for me now and soon and later, and touching up the bucket plan in the material now. What is happening now, soon and later? What are all the cash flow? What's adjusted philanthropically, execution wise? But there is the life planning part that you just alluded to deeply. That is also a part of the bucket plan. That is like, what happens now? What happens maybe soon, if I stay on or don't stay on, and what happens later? What does life look like, both from a financial planning and a life planning? And I think the framing of the bucket plan applies to both. And I think a good advisor will be there as a friend, as a counselor, as an advocate in both areas.
Absolutely. So Stan, I want to turn this last one over to you as we come to a conclusion here, but you've overseen large organizations through major transitions. What lessons can advisors apply when helping clients evaluate cultural fit, leadership shifts, or even just kind of operational changes in an M&A scenario?
Yeah, I will tell you this. I don't know how to say it louder, is that culture eats strategy for lunch. Absolutely check with others. If they've done other acquisitions, ask to interview those people, get to know the others. Usually they'll say yes. If they say no, that's a red flag. People that have been through it before with them. If you're the first one, that's okay too. Somebody has to be first that merges yourselves into an organization, but then get to know the people in the buyer's life, get to know their business partners, get to know them, get to know the culture. Who are these people? How do they live their life? Because that will be the thing. That 70% that are unhappy, it's almost never on the financial side. I mean, it could be if somebody just went off the reservation, but it's usually a cultural side. So get the culture right, act and get an actual due diligence operational game plan. Like literally, what exactly does life look like for my clients or me 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, 24 months from now? Don't just get high level answers, get operational. And then I would have an execution game plan. You have on our side of the house, let's say with the seller, who's going to help me with this? Who does this step? How do we get the clients over? Do they need to do new paperwork? What's the communication game plan? Don't have some theoretical thought in your head, have it written down specifically and force the other side, the buyers, to have the same thing. Exactly what do we do 90 days before, 60, 30 days after, 60 days after, 90 days after, 1 year. I think those things are critical. They're absolutely important. And the last thing I'll leave you with, it seems emotional, but it's real. We have to have, as a seller, deep conviction that this is the right thing to do. Not without a doubt here or there. Doubt is part of life, but enough conviction that this is right for my clients, right for our teammates, and therefore is worth the hard work. If you have that conviction, you'll be able to communicate it.
Well, this was great, my man. You're living proof of it. You're out in New York broadcasting from a hotel room, going and visiting 2 of the offices that are merging into Prosperity right now because it's all about culture and you're spending time with their team. And so appreciate what you do. And I always learn from you every time we're on these. And so thanks so much for being here today.
Thanks for tuning in to the Bucket Plan on Demand, brought to you by C2P, an organization whose purpose is to educate, train, grow, and support holistic financial advisors so families can achieve true prosperity. Subscribe today for the latest episodes and insights. Visit c2penterprises.com to learn how we can help support and enhance your advisory business. At the time of delivery and any subsequent publishing, information was deemed reliable, but is subject to change by the time of listening or viewing. The contents of this piece include options and projections of C2P, are subject to change, and are for informational purposes only. The information provided in this presentation is not intended to be individual investment, tax, or legal advice.